So, Johnny,
Hi,
a very special guest on the program today, and she is sat right next to you. Who is this lady?
this is Emily Squires, Dorothy Squires' niece.
And Joyce Golding's daughter, who is a variety artist.
Now, that's the thing, isn't it? Because you come from a family, not just your auntie, but the whole family were involved in show business in one way, shape, or form.
Yes, Auntie Reen was the fairy in Panto. That's Dorothy's sister.
Right.
And my dad did some extra work, rough riding. He doubled for Derek Farr in the 40s in a movie called Diamond City.
Right.
Mum was a singer. She started in Ensa. And her sister, when she was 19, went into show business and nicked Mum's act. But not for very long, though.
As someone said, plagiarism begins at home, isn't it? So if you're gonna find an act, nicked it off somebody you know and that you love. So your dad, a little bit about your dad. Then rough riding. Because was it from a family of show people that the family came from?
Dorothy allegedly came from gypsy stock and showground people, fairground people.
Yeah.
Her grandfather owned a coconut shy. And I always wondered when we went to fairs why she made a beeline for the coconuts. And she never aimed at the coconut itself. She aimed at the stick beneath it because that's what you have to hit, not the coconut itself. And then the coconut would come out the little container that it was in.
So she knew all the tricks.
She knew all the tricks. Well, that's the thing about Dorothy seemed to know all the tricks. Now then, about your mum, because your mum, well, you lost your dad fairly early in your...
Yeah, Dad was in the war. He was in Burma for the duration. And I think personally that the malaria he got damaged his kidneys. So in about 1955, he got nephritis and uremia, and he died. He just wizened away to nothing.
Wow.
6'4", but there was nothing of him, skin and bone in the end.
Yeah.
So I was 5, he was 36.
And your mother was on tour, and she at the same time.
Mum was the night that Dad died. She was singing with Vera Lynn, and Vera Lynn asked her whether she wanted to go on. She said, "Well, somebody's got to pay the bills," which is what the case was really when Dad died.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So Emily, what sort of act did your mum do? What was your mum's act?
When my mum first started, she was singing. She had an operatic voice, so she was a soprano, but she had one of those freak voices where she could sing tenor and baritone.
Right.
So she impersonated Hutch, I think. I wasn't around at that time, but she impersonated Hutch as well as other people too.
Yeah.
And she was a comedian as well.
Yeah.
But later on, she teamed up with a guy called Tony Stewart, who was a dancer and choreographer. He choreographed Sadler's Wells Ballet, I think.
Really?
Once, and he also appeared. You saw him in.
I saw him in The Boyfriend.
In The Boyfriend,
I didn't know who he was at those days. But the thing is, though, see, Dorothy used to tell me that her mother, Joyce, was a very talented woman, but didn't have enough confidence in herself and shouldn't be doing a double. Actually, should have been on her own doing it, which she did at the beginning.
Oh, yes, she did.
Yeah.
No, she was very good because people still remember when I talk about her.
Yeah.
Sometimes nowadays. I've got loads of programs with her in, so I'll probably put them on that Facebook variety thing at some point in time.
That'll be great because once it's gone.
Because she played Panto. She was the dame. She was one of the very few female dames to play Panto.
Really? And obviously Dot thought the world of her performance-wise. She thought she was pretty terrific.
Oh, yes. She was always bigging her up, yeah.
Well, she did pantos that Dot wrote, didn't she? Or...
Yeah, she was in, I think, 2 of Dorothy's pantos. The year that I was born, she was doing Panto.
All right.
Along with Roger. No, Roger wasn't there then. No, with Tony. Tony wrote that Panto, the one in Llanelli.
Which was the one that, was it Morecambe and Wise? No, it wasn't Morecambe and Wise. It was Leslie...
Oh, Crowther.
Crowther. That was his first job, I think.
Yes, he was about 17 years old.
Really?
And he was in it.
Yeah, you just started into conversation and Roger wasn't there. Which Roger?
Roger was in actually one of the pantos.
No.
Not that early one, but he was in the pantos, and Mum used to do a duet with him, and she used to start off in the wrong key so he'd follow because he wasn't that particularly clever.
For those that don't know who Roger is, he's Roger Moore.
Roger Moore.
Sorry, Uncle Roger.
Uncle Roger. Because that was your family. Now, then your mum, as you said, somebody had to pay the bills. So what happened to you? Where did you go?
She didn't want to give me to any of Dorothy's relatives. Sorry, my mum didn't want to give me to Dorothy or her sister.
Why is that? She didn't trust her.
She didn't trust them. And her own sisters were too young.
Yeah.
So I went to a convent, a boarding school in a convent, which was interesting when I was 5. I didn't like it very much, but once I was in there, I made friends in there, and it was okay. But it wasn't the happiest places to be when your father's just died and your mother's disappeared.
Yeah,
not really understanding anything.
Wow.
I survived.
Would your mum come back for holiday time, or how would that work?
Not really. I spent my holidays with either my grandmother or in Dorothy's house in Bexhill. I went to school in Dartford, which isn't very far away from Bexhill. So I went there and brought some boarders back with me on numerous occasions, 24 of them in the pool.
24?
Yes.
Any nuns?
Yeah, a couple of nuns. Dorothy's language normally is quite colourful, was quite colourful, but she managed to get through the afternoon without elaborating
I mean,
graphically.
It must have been so strange for suddenly, I mean, they must have looked so glamorous coming to this convent school in Dartmouth. I mean, it must have been bizarre, mustn't it?
Well, they turned up to see you in a concert, didn't they?
Roger and Dorothy came to see me playing Humpty Dumpty in the school concert at the end, and she'd sit in the front row making sort of comments or stage directions throughout the programme. So, yeah. And she'd also turn up at the school sometimes in the powder blue Thunderbird, and a mink coat, which was...
She didn't do things by half.
I didn't really think about it then. It was only afterwards that I thought it was a bit ostentatious.
Just a little bit, but going to stay with her, having family, it sounds like she almost became not your second mum, but she was definitely a big part of your growing up in that case.
Yeah, she was around a lot of the time, and she was a bit like Auntie Mame. I said before, she was a bit unconventional. I mean, I was let to do what I liked most of the time. Nobody said you have to be in bed by a certain time or do this or do that. It was like I was treated like a grown-up, which I quite liked. So, yeah.
Yeah, you were at all the parties, were you?
Yeah. The place was full sometimes. It was just heaving with all the different people. The ones that I remember, because there was several people like Jackie Trent, Tony Hatch, Patrick Cargill, Tony Osborne, the orchestra leader and composer.
Wilfred Bramble, was there, wasn't he?
Wilfred Bramble, also Lionel Blair and Shirley Bassey, Dinah Dawes. There was an afternoon actually party. I don't know why it was an afternoon, but there was Dorothy, Shirley Bassey and Dinah Dawes each doing a song each. And I felt sorry because Diana went at the end of it and she didn't have the strongest voice out of the three of them. But she was lovely, actually. I knew Dinah Dawes from when I was 3 years old up until the time that she died. She'd often turn up at Dorothy's with, in the end, Alan Lake and her son, Jason.
Wow.
Yeah.
I only ever met Diana Dawes once. It wasn't with Dot, though. I did a gig with her up in Bradford or something. She was doing a cabaret. She wasn't the greatest cabaret act. She looked beautiful, but that was about it.
I liked her. She was a nice person. I mean, I did hear stories in the early days about her and Dennis Hamilton, but I liked her. Yeah. She was nice.
Yeah. I mean, tell us about Dot then, because Johnny and I have spoken about Dot a couple of times and trying to get about the real person, the insecurities and the largeness of life in her. What was she like in her quiet moments? Was she always confident? Was she always that show-off star?
Well, she'd often say she was only a little fella.
Yeah, that was a phrase. I'm
only a little fella.
Yeah.
But she was just like an auntie when in the quiet moments, and it was like not like she was my aunt. She was like a friend. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but when Roger left, I was 10, 11. And I felt so sorry for her. I felt her loneliness. And I thought I wanted to be with her because she needed me, though she probably didn't need me, but I just felt that I should be there so that I could listen to her. It was quite odd, really.
Yeah, yeah. Roger, you mentioned Roger.
Sorry, Roger, yeah.
Yeah. What was he? Because he was quite a lot younger than her, wasn't he?
I have good feelings about Roger. What he did, things happen in life.
Yeah.
But he was always nice to me. It was quite irritating sometimes when he became very popular, when he did Ivanhoe.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I used to go training horse riding with him when I was little. Well, he was going over the jumps. I was on his little pony down at the riding school at the bottom of the road. But it was annoying when we used to go places like Blackheath for a fair. You get out the car, we'd walk to the middle of the fairground and stuff, and then people would notice him and sort of all come over wanting his autograph and stuff like that. So we had to go back home again. So it was quite... it interfered with my childhood and my fun.
Tell him that story about when you took all the kids, Roger came to pick him up and went and get the ice cream. What's that?
Well, that was when they came to the Mount in Bexley, the 24 of them, after they'd had swimming, which she had to empty her knicker drawer because none of them had swimming costumes because they didn't know that they were going to come up there. So all these little sort of 6 to 13-year-olds wearing their knickers and jumping in and out of the pub. But afterwards, Roger went down the village and got ice cream for everyone and brought it back. And they all sat in the shade eating it. But yeah, he was kind.
Yeah, I only met him once, but he was the type of bloke that he could make you feel important. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? He made you feel you were the only person there at the time. He's Charlie Charm, really, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Was he always...
Uncle Rog.
Was he always gorgeous, Uncle Rog? Was he always, because
I never thought about him like that. It was when I went to school and people found out that Roger was my uncle. It was, oh, aren't you lucky? Good looking. And you don't think about your family as good looking or stuff like that. I did actually hear them fighting towards the end, which wasn't nice.
Right.
Because he was shouting at her and he wanted to go back to Yugoslavia where he met Louisa and she wanted to knife him and he got a bit...
got a bit over the top.
Right over the top. And on other occasions, he was playing the guitar to her badly, actually, and trying to sing.
I think the loveliest story, the Hilda, Hilda was her secretary, told me once, after he left, he came back for some of his stuff. And she could hear Dorothy stomping about upstairs. And all of a sudden, this case with all his clothes in came flying through the window. It's him in the back of the neck. It was like one of these comedy shows. Bang! Now, get going. To words that I expect.
Yes, they said, push off. I say.
Push off, yes.
But he was my hero too, because I got chicken pox at the convent and he brought me back home in his Alpine Sunbeam. So he carried me in from there, so...
Oh my God.
Yeah, there were things that you just remember. I also remember him being a hypochondriac.
Really?
He cut himself once while attempting to do some DIY.
Yeah.
And came out of the shed with his hand covered in blood, screaming, "Get me a doctor! Get me a doctor!"
They're all the same. Johnny. They're all the same.
I know. They're all the same. These actors. You can't help it. Oh God!
When he left, and did the place become a different home for you then?
It was quieter, but I think some of the family came back again.
Because he was always full of the family, but I remember.
I mean, it was a massive house. I was saying to John the other day, although in the end there was only 3 bedrooms that the family used, there was 9 originally. Right. The rest of them were all servants' quarters. Not that Dorothy had servants, but the house itself was built as such. It was a mansion. So it had 22 rooms altogether, which was great for playing hide and seek as a child. But yes, it was enormous.
Yeah.
I remember the parties because you didn't know where you were sleeping in these parties. I remember Dorothy asking you to make a bed up for me once. This is when she was, how old were you then?
14.
14. I mean, I've known her since she's 14. Wow. She was my girlfriend once. Right. And she's still my best pal.
Oh, isn't that terrific though? Over the years to have all
Can't get rid of him.
No, tell me about it. Tell me about it. me about
we
it.
met on air, and we haven't stopped talking since.
I know.
We
I
haven't
know, it's
we haven't
amazing.
shaken hands yet. I'm going to Swansea soon to talk to him in person.
Oh, right.
Were you tempted then to go into show business at all yourself, Emily? Was that?
I sung with Dorothy when I came to live with her. She said, "You've got a voice, you should be singing." I thought, well, she wants somebody with her. So I did. I actually sang on the Palladium for 3 nights. People would give their eye teeth to do something like that. And also around the country as well. And then Glasgow, Edinburgh, the Edinburgh Festival.
Wow.
And down here in
You did the club. You did
Tito's and
the
Gossamer.
Tito's, and you did what's the one in Porth called? The Stoneleigh Club.
Yeah.
All those big nightclubs that used to be about,
Yeah.
But I'm no singer. I can hold a tune, but it's not.
What did you say?
The being
What was your material?
I didn't sing many songs. I did Send in the Clowns, but we did a duet of Ebb Tide together.
Wow.
She railroaded you,
She
basically.
railroaded me. She wanted me to sing that song that you don't like either,
Bridge
Over Troubled Water.
Yeah, that's right.
I went, I'm not singing that.
Were you close to when the decline happened? I mean, I know you were there when the court cases happened. We've got lovely pictures of you going to court.
I was a witness in one of the court cases she had against Weston Taylor, How Love Turned Sour by Dorothy Squires. The interview was nothing like that. It was all about a new project of having an office up in town and having pluggers for her records and stuff like that. But they splashed this expose about her and Roger, which was nothing like the interview. So I was a witness in that case, which she won. But later, I think they appealed.
Yeah. But she had, I mean, she was made a vexatious litigant.
She had 33 court cases and was deemed a vexatious litigant in the end.
People have no
idea. It's laughing. It's not funny.
No, but I mean, we talked about her lifestyle. Race horses.
Yeah, she had about 5 or 6 race horses. The main ones were Esban and Norwegian Flag. Norwegian Flag, unfortunately, died or had to be put to sleep. Yeah. I think Esban won the Welsh Grand National, the Scottish Grand National.
Yeah.
One of her horses. Yeah, she loved them.
Yeah.
She wanted to have them as tax deductible, I remember, at one time, and they wouldn't allow her.
It was worth a try. You never know. But they eventually did catch up with her for lots of different reasons, and she lost it all.
Yeah. Not all of it, but the majority of it, yes.
Do you know what I remember, and I think it's still strange to me today. She hadn't paid some musicians or something.
It was the singers.
The singers, that's right. The backing singers on one of the shows. And the fixer, I've forgotten her name now. Can't remember. What was her name?
I don't know.
Anyway, she said she owed her something piffling, like about 300 quid. And she refused to pay it. She was like that. She dig her heels in. No, they were booked as musicians. I'm not paying them that. And they took her to court for that. And that's what started it all going wrong. Yeah. But she still had plenty. They took the house and but I'm sure, because the house was being worth what, $1 million odd in those days?
Easily. Yeah, the one at Bray.
Yeah. So it was a real shame because it was like a pack of cards then, everything came tumbling down.
Yeah. Did you keep in touch with her during those darker years as well, Emily, or did you
on and off? Not all the time, because she became a recluse. She'd phone me, but she wouldn't give me a phone number or address where she was, because we'd fallen out. We were often falling out. She was either throwing me out or I was walking out. Happened quite regularly.
What was the letter she sent you? You leave the words out.
Oh, all right, okay. The last time I moved out, it was, your washing machine misses you, your flowers miss you, the Hoover misses you. In fact, we all miss you.
Oh wow!
She was always sorry for what she did. She'd have a row with you, but the next minute she'd make you a cup of tea. She never bore a grudge, did she?
No. She as I said, she was like Auntie May, but she could also be like Cruella de Vil.
Right.
And it was those that were scary. She never frightened me, but she frightened a lot of people. I knew what she was like. And sometimes I wished I was older so that I could have helped her more emotionally, but I didn't understand. I mean, every song, because she wrote 56 songs herself, but the majority of those songs were about Roger, really. The titles like Never Let Him Know, Find a Way Back into His Heart, Where Can I Go? And Your Flowers Arrive Too Late, all of those.
Yeah.
She was just, she fell apart when Roger went. And it just ate away at her all the time.
And did other people take advantage of her as well? You know, because she was so, I mean, she was such a big star. I suppose everybody wants a piece of you when you're that successful, that famous.
There were hangers-on. There were people that wanted to use her for their own ends, but she's quite canny. I don't.
Well, you wouldn't catch her. Yeah,
you wouldn't catch her. She'd soon find out about you.
Yeah. But there were the hangers on that weren't around when in the end, after she had the downfall, where were they? They weren't to be found, were they?
No.
You know, people who've been very close to her. You know, like a secretary and a friend from Llanelli who'd lived in the house. They wouldn't open the door to her. I mean, I couldn't believe it, actually. That's when we lost touch with her. I lost touch with her for about 10 years, but so did you, didn't you?
It wasn't 10 years. It was a good while, though. I mean, I was getting phone calls, but I couldn't phone her.
Yeah. What about your own life then, Emily? What happened to you when you finally didn't go back for the washing machine or the flowers? What did you do?
Well, my mother wasn't well, so she was having emotional problems. Mum was, so I went home to Brighton, and I gave up my flat in London because I had one in London as well as staying with Dorothy. And I came back home to look after Mum, and I thought, well, I'll make sure she's all right, and I'll go back to London again. But I never did. Yeah. Her relationship fell apart, so I ended up staying there and getting a job and just staying, and just became a production manager, not in the business, in a telecommunications company.
Right.
So you were a dental surgeon. What were you, a dental nurse or something?
I worked for one of the pioneers of implantology and dentistry in London at one time. I did that for about 10 years, being a dental nurse and stuff like that.
And she used to go out with rock stars. She won't tell you who they are.
Well, I know Johnny Dude is one of them.
Tell her the story about the club when I was doing the Beaverwood Club. This club was near Dorothy's house, and she wouldn't come and see me because she said they'd been banned. She'd been banned. So tell him the story.
One Christmas Eve, there was a knock at the front door, and it was Tom Jones, and one of the Pretty Things, I think it was. But it was the Pretty
Things.
There
was a group called the Pretty Things.
The Pretty Things, one of them. So Dorothy and he and a few others decided that we'd go to the Beaverwood Country Club, but everybody was behaving really badly. And we got banned. We got chucked out.
And then when I was doing it, she wouldn't come and see me because she said, "Banned, I can't go in there." She said, "I couldn't believe it."
I mean, it was a remarkable time to be young and to be
absolutely
in London and in that circle, as you say. I mean, the pop music thing, as well as Dorothy, I suppose she was starting to be thought of as being, that generation. But all that pop music happening, and you were young in the 60s when it was happening.
Oh yeah, I was what. I'm 70 now. So yes, I was like in my teens and late teens. So yeah, I was enjoying myself. The guy I worked for in London, the dentist, he didn't think I was going to turn up each morning for work because I was out partying I slept most of the weekend, but partied most of the week. And he thought I was going to die at the end. I was a bit of a wild child, I think.
It's funny. Yeah, kids these days, they don't know, do they? They don't know. They have no idea. So that I'm just thinking, because obviously Johnny's been a part of your life ever since, and it's funny that you've now got, you don't live that far apart anymore, do you?
No, down the road.
Down the road, isn't it?
Well, she lived in.
I lived in Hove.
Yeah, and when your mother died, you decided to come back to Wales, or the land of your fathers.
Well, I was spent time being English, so I'm now spending time being Welsh.
That's right.
My father was born in Wales, yes.
Yeah.
Incidentally, my dad was in the cavalry, the Blues and Royals. He rode in the coronation of George VI. And his mother, Emily, who I was named after, waited on the corner near Buckingham Palace for him to ride by. As he rode by, she fainted. But yeah, he also sat outside Buckingham Palace on a horse, as well as the Blues and Royals. So that's where he learnt to ride.
Yeah, makes sense. Now that's how he got the gig.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Just looking at your mum and looking at your auntie, it was hard to be a woman in the industry in those days. I mean, they all those different pressures on them.
Yeah, it was natural for me that it was just there and it happened. It's only when you take a look back at stuff you realise what they were like and what they had to put up with. I mean, Dorothy in particular. I mean, she
was tough though. She had to be, I suppose. Didn't she?
Mum was tough, but she wasn't as tough as Dorothy. She wouldn't fight for herself. She'd rather. Well, she married again, and we had a pub in Brighton. So she carried on working until about the 1960, which I didn't realise. I'd seen.
She was very funny, her mother. She was the right character. Up until the end, she was 90, wasn't she, when she died?
Yeah, she died 90. I kept saying to her from the age of 60, you've got to go at least. You're not going until you're 90. So each year she'd say, I'm feeling so. I went, no, you're not. You're going to go when you're 90. At the beginning of the year that she died, she said to me, I don't think I can make it. I said, you've got to get to July when her birthday, 90th birthday was. So she made it. She said, I don't think I can do it to the end of the year. And she died on Christmas Eve.
Yeah,
that year, but she lived till she was 90.
Well done.
They were tough, like you say, Mal. They were tough. They had to be tough, the ladies. I mean, I remember Dot coming home once. I was at Bexhill, and she'd been in the West End plugging a record and going around the BBC and been out all day slapping around doing this. And she came in and she took her shoes off and she stood in the little library and she says to me, Jimmy, you won't play my records. And that Doreen Davis, I've had enough of her. I'm in the chat. Why can't I be? And in the middle of it, she went, I don't care, John, but I'm only a little fella. And all of a sudden she was like vulnerable. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was a record plugger for a while working for her.
You were?
So people like Doreen Davis.
Yeah.
And I became, I don't know the word to use, Jimmy Savile.
Oh, tell it.
I went to Radio Luxembourg, which was in London, to plug a record. And long story short, he invited me to sit on his lap and then go out for a meal with him that night. And I was like, no, thank you very much. My boyfriend wouldn't like it very much. Anyway, that night, Dorothy was in Pie Studios.
Yeah.
And round the corner was a Chinese restaurant. And we went in there and I told Dorothy what happened. And he was sitting alone having a Chinese meal. Well,
who was? Savile?
Savile was. So I went, don't do anything. Anyway, she went over to him and she whispered in his ear. I cannot say what she whispered. She came back and told me, but it didn't bother me ever again.
Well, there we are. She obviously loved you a great deal, didn't she? She loved you a great deal. Yeah. Well, it's been lovely to talk to you. Again, when we have these conversations, it's almost like we're just scratching the surface, Johnny, isn't it? It's like we just get into the beginning. This is an incredible story, Emily. And as I keep on telling Johnny, we need to write these down. We need to save these stories before.
I tell her she should do a biography. She won't do it.
Yes, I will. But I'm frightened of dropping myself in it most of the time.
Why? Because you were a naughty girl when you were young.
Yeah.
I want to know who the pop stars were, who the rock stars were.
You know he was. They had a number one record.
John.
I'm not going to say who it is.
No, absolutely. Lots of people had number one records.
It was a group. It was one of the groups.
You've said enough.
No, they don't. There's hundreds of groups.
Yes, and lots of groups in the 60s who had number one hits.
Yeah, anyway, it was one of those.
Well, the case, absolutely.
And Dorothy didn't like it.
Will you? I'll pull your ear out that.
Emily, you can trust us with your stories. They won't go any further, will they, Johnny?
Should have stuck with me, Em. I told you.
All right, well, look, lovely to speak to the both of you. So it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from her, and it's goodbye from me.
And you, guys.
And us, guys.